something like that. But if I may use my glasses here, we had a very short trip. The next trip was to the Azore Islands, and we took 50-gallon drums of high-octane gasoline, which is always a lovely cargo when there are submarines around. We did not do much smoking on deck or anything of that sort because it was kind of dangerous. And it was an uneventful trip, only took a month or two, and we came back to the States, and now the next trip they were short of officers, so they allowed some of the cadets who had had as much time as we did, 9 months at sea, to sail as third officer. Excuse me. So that was kind of a delight for us, plus the fact that we didn't have to go back to school. But they gave us an open book exam to do at sea. And we loaded up again in and headed up towards the North Atlantic with a cargo for Great Britain. And I think we came across a couple of icebergs. One of them they call a growler, which is probably a third of the size of a football field, but you can't see much of it. It's just awash in the ocean water, and you just don't want to hit one of those or you're done. We'd probably rest next to the Titanic, I guess. So we got to England and back, and it was fairly uneventful. We had to pick up barrage balloons when we got to northern Scotland before we went down the coast, because there were German dive bombers around and also torpedo boats. So we got through that trip fine and dandy, and finally back again to the States. Now this is I'd just like to show you this chart. What it is, this is from a German publication, and the Germans had mapped the Atlantic Ocean, North and South Atlantic, into squares. And when any of their submarines came across a convoy, they would fall behind the convoy and simply trail it. And they would radio back to Berlin, Admiral Donitz, and tell them where they were, how many ships there were, and what speed and course. And then he would follow the convoy and wait for his wolf pack to come along. And that did happen on one occasion. We had picked up a submarine. He was probably sitting on the bottom of the Grand Banks waiting for ships to go by, and the Grand Banks are very shallow. And he followed us along, and the first indication we had of him was about 1 o'clock in the morning. A tanker in the rear of our convoy was torpedoed, and we watched him burn till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And then about an hour later, there was an explosion. I never want to hear like of it again. The submarine, probably the same one or one of the others of the wolf pack, hit an ammunition ship, and it absolutely shook everything. And as far as we could learn later, there were no survivors from either ship, especially the ammunition ship. And the military escorts were not permitted to pick up survivors because they then would be a target for the submarine. And we couldn't afford to lose any escorts. I think the next day was a Sunday, and that was when we were in the unenviable position of what they call coffin corner. We were in the first row, third ship. We were the last ship in the row. And we were all wondering, because it was a pretty itchy situation with the 2 torpedoings the night before. And for some reason or another, we couldn't figure out a submarine surfaced right between the rows of the ships. right next to a baby flat top, as we call it. It was a merchant ship made over into a small aircraft carrier. And the aircraft carrier had a complete bank of 20 millimeter guns, and they let loose, and the bullets just ricocheted into the merchant ship right next to them. But the submarine went down, and within about an hour or two, a destroyer escort pulled up sort of alongside of us, and raised his red pennant, which means I am discharging depth charges. And he picked up the submarine and dropped his charges and evidently damaged the submarine. The submarine had to surface, and the baby flat top pulled out of the formation, out of the convoy, and they launched two what are known as British swordfish, old, almost World War I type of aircraft, double-wing fellas, and they just circled around. No IVFs, so maybe they just went in and blew the submarine right out of the water. So that was over with, and we proceeded on towards England, and about a day out of England, we couldn't believe it. We saw the rockets going off from the middle of the convoy where the Commodore was, and we looked up, and there must have been the entire German Air Force that was left. There were about 100 bombers in the air, and they gave the signal to disperse the convoy, and we just went in all directions to make a less likely target for the bombers. But oddly enough, old Adolf was probably home wanting to swing that bomber command back and attack England from the west side as a surprise. But it was no longer a surprise, because we surely broke radio silence and gave the word to England what was coming. And not one bomb was dropped. And this is 76 ships we had with thousands of tons of war cargo. And they didn't touch us. Just totally ridiculous. So we went on into England with the cargo and unloaded and came on back, and we were in just great shape, thank God. Very lucky, very lucky. One other trip I did have, excuse me, my hay fever, it's killing me. We set sail from the States with cargo for Marseille, France. And I was told by a couple of the older seamen, I was 23, that Marseille was a very, very tough port. The stevedores were among the toughest in the world. And just to be a little careful. So we arrived in Marseille, and the Germans were there to greet us. They were flying a bombing raid over Marseille, for God's sakes. And we were stupid enough to stand there and watch the planes come over in the searchlights. And a couple of the French stevedores, they knew better. They jumped right overboard because they didn't want any part of it. So that was over without any damage whatsoever. I think our anti-aircraft guns were a little more than they could handle. So I had one personal experience. I'm no hero, but our captain had insisted that no French personnel, no stevedores, be allowed in the midship house because they just steal everything. And this one French stevedore came in to the midship house, and he wanted to have a drink of water at the fountain, and I said, "I'm sorry, I can't let you in here. It's the captain's orders." And the next thing I knew, he just went like this, and all of a sudden he had a 6-inch knife blade in his hand. So I thought, well, maybe it's the time to leave, but I had no place to go. I backed up, and I was against the galley wall, And right next to me was, you probably have one home, I have one home, a cement laundry tub, nice sharp edges on it. And one of the sailors very conveniently left this empty wine bottle in the tub. Now, I'd seen John Wayne do this a couple times, and I thought, I hope I'm not going to get screwed up on this one. So I picked up the bottle, hit it on the edge, and it was the most gorgeous looking weapon you ever want to see. So I just stood like this, I didn't say a thing. I think I probably wet my pants. Put the knife away and went out on deck. So I went up to my room, unlocked my drawer, got my .38 caliber revolver out, loaded it, put it on in my holster, and walked out on deck looking for this guy. And he was back at one of the after hatches, and I saw him working the winch. So I walked over, and we had floodlights for the unloading, and I put my foot up on the combing of the hatch with this .38 dangling there, and a couple of the French stevedores started to talk a little bit, and then he looked around and he saw it. And I just wanted to make sure he saw it, because now I had something a little better than his knife. So I just walked away, and nothing ever happened. But it's one of those dumb things you do, but you damn well better do it, you know, or you're going to get stuck. So that was pretty much the end of that trip. Back home, no problems at sea, and they sent us out to the west coast, and I picked up a tanker there, a T2 tanker, made by Kaiser, beautiful ship, much faster than this. We could, emergency speed, we could do 19 knots. And we loaded up with, what else? High-octane gasoline, probably 50,000 barrels, and about the same amount of diesel fuel oil. And we went out into the Pacific, and we delivered our cargo to Guadalcanal and Tulagi and a few of the other vacation spots that you don't want to be at. And we got out of there, came back, cargo of oil, and go back out to the Pacific again. And while we were off the coast of South America, I was on the bridge, and it was nice tropical breezes blowing, and all of a sudden this German submarine surfaced and cut right across our bow, and I thought, these guys must drink for lunch, you know, I mean, such a stupid thing to do. So I wasn't on watch, our second mate was on watch, and he immediately I rang the general alarm, and he went into the wheelhouse and said, hard right. So he took the ship in this direction, and the submarine was coming like so. Now, the Kaiser ship was a new ship, and it had on it listening devices down in the keel. And the only noise they would pick up would be that of a torpedo propeller. And I heard this squeal from the bridge, and I ran down, and the green light was flashing on this machine, and I went out on the bridge, looked over the side, this torpedo went right down the side. I finished my hard breathing, and then the red light went off, and the other sound went off. I ran inside, went over to the other side of the bridge, and on the port side, another torpedo went right down that side. So we made a turn, and we went to emergency speed, which I say was 19 knots, and the submarine surfaced probably a quarter of a mile or so behind us. And he started to fire, and the Southern Tennessee farm boys who were operating our 5-inch stern gun shot the damn periscope off the submarine. Now, it was a 1,000,000-to-1 shot, but Mr. Middlebrook would have loved that one. You know, the farm boys really could shoot. They didn't bathe very often. We had to throw them in the shower and get a floor brush. But Who cared if they were dirty when they could shoot like that? So that was pretty much it. We went back to the Panama Canal, and my roommate and I were taken off because we had more than enough sea time, and we had to go back to the academy and sit for a third mate's license. And that was pretty much the end of that, with the exception of the fact that we got a flying boat out of Panama for Miami. And halfway between Panama and Miami, one of the damn engines stopped. Hey, Jack, that's your fault. It's your department in the Air Corps. So that plane just went down like a rock. And fortunately, I don't know how they moved around in the plane, but they got the doggone engine started again, and we got into Miami, and boy, there was oil all over that one particular engine, but we were lucky, very lucky. So that got me to the academy, and I was there for, I guess, a 1 month license preparation, and finally passed my test. And it was a week-long test, really. I'm sorry, but they threw everything at us. Rules of the road and navigation were most important. And I think maybe 1 or 2 out of 80 or 90 men flunked the test. So we were on our way. We had our brand new gold braid. We were no longer cadets. And my God, we rated a salute from the other cadets. So we walked around the academy and enjoyed it. And then there we were going off to the war administration again. For what reason, I don't know, but we were sent around to the West Coast and to pick up a cargo of coal. Now, as far as I know, there's plenty of coal on the East Coast, but they sent us around to the West Coast, and we were halfway between California and Genoa, Italy, where it was destined for, when a fire broke out in one of our holes. It was just spontaneous combustion, I suppose, and it smoldered all the way to Genoa, Italy, but really didn't do any damage, and of course we got there in pretty good shape. And that was pretty much it. We left Genoa and came back into Gibraltar Harbor, and it was a mess. We ran into a gale in there, and I had the unfortunate experience of being on watch, and the ship was just blown all over the harbor, dragging the anchor and whatnot. So we finally headed for South America, where we were supposed to pick up a cargo of corn, and we had an Argentine refugee and an Italian lady aboard as passengers, and they wanted to go to Argentina, so we were allowed to take them. And there was only one bothersome thing about that. When we got down to the tropics, I was on watch on the bridge, and there I was with my binoculars, and I happened to look on the deck, and this Italian lady had no clothes on. She was sunning herself on the first hatch, and this is with 75 or 80 men on board ship who hadn't seen anybody in that condition in a while. So when she was all finished sunning, I didn't dare go up there. When she was all finished sunning, I suggested to her that she not do that again. And I guess she heeded my warning. I don't see any juveniles. I see all gray-haired adolescents here, so. When we were in Genoa, Italy, this is a lovely-looking young lady, and she was a professional lady of the night. if you get my meaning. And she really was pretty. And we danced and had a great time, and she suggested I go back to her room with her, and there was a discussion about money, and I thought, well, hell, this is no way to start my romantic life. So I decided I'd go back on watch. I was due anyway. And one of the other shipmates very politely took my place. There's only one problem. The third officer is also the medical officer. And 2 weeks later, he came along and he said, hey, Warren, I have a problem. And I said, what's your problem? As if I didn't know. Well, his problem was that penicillin was not too well known, but where it was known, it was a miracle drug. And unfortunately, somebody had stolen our supply because it was worth a fortune in Italy, worth a fortune. So I said, I don't know what I'll do. And then overnight, this U.S. destroyer came into the harbor, and I got a launch out, and I went over with another fellow, and I said, we're in a tough spot. I said, one of the men has one of the social diseases, and I need some penicillin. I said, ours is stolen. So he gave me 5 vials, and I think there was, I don't know, I think there was 100,000 units in a vial or something like that. And I didn't know one end of the hypodermic needle from the other. So at any rate, you're all grown up. He said, the pharmacist mate said, drop your pants. So the seaman dropped his pants. He took a piece of black surgical chalk and put a big X on each cheek. And he said, hit each cheek every 4 hours with one shot. So the seaman said, boy, Warren, I'll never do that again. It couldn't have been more than a week or two. He was cured. And I saw him going ashore. I said, where the hell are you going? He said, oh, I got to see that woman. And I said, I don't have all the penicillin in the world, Buster. So anyhow, that was pretty much it. I got a trip, and we went to Port Said, Egypt, and they declared the war against Japan over. So they turned us around and sent us on home. And from then on, I was unemployed. Had to find myself a job. So that's pretty much it. I know I didn't cover everything, but there is one thing I'd like to talk about for a minute, if I may, and that was hinted at in the poem read when I started, before I started. The Merchant Marine were not recognized as veterans until I think January or February of 1988. We had missed all of the benefits, and there were so many young men who would have loved to have gone to college but couldn't. And we also had some pretty sad situations. About in the middle of my tenure, one of the men had gone to the hospital, one of the hospitals in Staten Island, and they did receive Army, Navy, and Merchant Marine personnel. But we had some amputees, and one fellow told me we even had a few quadriplegics in that hospital. But what would happen to them is simply that when they were in reasonable condition, they would be turned out with no further help from the government. And this is something that has bothered a lot of us. Nothing that can be done about it. It's all past. But it was a shame that that situation came along. And I think Uncle Sam could have taken a little better care. And that's why when they come up with Agent Orange and all the rest of this stuff, I would hope they look into it pretty well for our servicemen, because they deserve it, deserve everything they can get from what they're getting into. Brandon Treister was a great help to me when he interviewed me, and I believe he's headed for Iraq if he's not there already. And it's, as I told you, it's a stinky situation over there. June, July, August, you get into temperatures 130 degrees, disease all over the place, place you don't want to be. So anything I've said today does not in any way mean to detract from our servicemen. I think altogether we did a hell of a job in World War II. And guys like Jack who flew, all kinds of people put everything into it that they could. One thing more I'll mention, I'll leave. I always thought the U.S. Coast Guard guarded our coast. One of the first vessels I saw in the Persian Gulf was a Coast Guard cutter with a red stripe on it, and I thought, my God, what are you doing here? You're pretty far from our coast. And he said, well, we're guarding a coast. So that's my story. Oh, yeah, sure.
We'll take a few questions. Now, the rules are as they always have been. You raise your hand, I'll come to you with the microphone, and you'll ask your question so that everybody in the room can hear it. First question. Oh, I don't recognize the question.
That's important. First question, is there anyone in the audience who might be skilled at helping us to get our slideshow onto the projector so that we could show some slides to the rest of you? We're having trouble doing it, and it looks like nobody in the library is able to get it from here to there.
Any answers to that question?
Don, you'll have to put it together afterwards.
Yeah, but for now, if somebody can do it, we can do it.
Any questions?
I don't think you have a chance of getting that put together.
Did you continue to stay in the Merchant Marines after the war?
About 10 minutes.
Oh.
I had a chief mate who said, you've got it in your blood. You'll never leave. I said, so long.
Well, that was a lot of experience to throw down the drain.
You know, you're away from home all the time. When you've seen one ocean wave, you've seen the other.
Warren, 8 weeks, is that the amount of time you spent at the Merchant Marine Academy before you went to your first ship?
Long Island, Kings Point County, 8 weeks.
That's not very long to learn command of a ship.
They shoehorn and they push it in both ears. The instructors were excellent. They really were excellent. Of course, I've always liked guns, and I took to that end of it pretty well. But I took a real fancy to navigation, because here you are out in the middle of nowhere, water all over the place. They give you this funny little T-bone sextant, and with that and a watch, you can find out where you are. And I kind of became proficient at it because I loved it. I really loved it. We have a contest as to who got the closest. Because today you don't have to worry about it because they have all these instruments that bounce off satellites.
Right. Thank you.
Question?
There are a few things up here if you want to, if you have any interest in looking at them. The book on German submarines.
We could show slideshows to a few people that want to see them on the laptop.
Maybe they can hear me. You went over in a convoy, right? When you came back, did you come back in a convoy?
Generally, no. Generally, no. It sounds kind of heartless, but Liberty ships were built with one trick in mind.
I'm wondering what the attack activity would have been. Any idea? Were there more attacks when the ships came back alone, or?
They were pretty, the Germans and Japanese were pretty much interested in loaded cargo ships.
Yeah.
I can't say that for sure, but I don't think we ever had, well, we had the one problem off South America, that German submarine wanted to sink us. We were a tanker, but we were light.
Warren, after you finished your 8 weeks at Kings Point and you went on your first ship, what were your duties and responsibilities then? Were you still a cadet, or were you...
But one thing I would like to mention to you, cadets from Kings Point were the only cadets that went to war. They did not go to war from West Point. They did not go to war from Annapolis. We were the only ones. And my duties, boy, could I paint when I finished. We got into our man, and the captain said, "See the starboard side?" "Yes, sir." It's painting. 440 foot, 441 feet, 6 inches long, and 50 feet out of the water. And then the first storm we had, the rain blew the paint right off. I never painted in watercolor.
Any questions?
I just have a comment, a further comment. I only made one trip on a Liberty ship.
Right.
It was from Manila to Yokohama.
Right.
And I admire your patience, because all of us look like we could get out and walk faster than the Liberty ship.
Yeah, but you get your feet wet.
Warren, were any Navy assigned for you for the guns to take care of the ship? Weren't there several Navy on one? Regular Navy ship? Did you have some Navy people on the ship besides?
We had armed guard gun crew. There were approximately 35 merchant seamen and approximately 35 in the Navy gun crew.
You had mentioned it before, though.
What?
You hadn't mentioned that before, did you?
Sorry,
Hooray for the Navy, fella.
all of the merchantmen were assigned a gun as well, because if the Navy men were injured or killed, we took over. As I said, I like guns, so when the general alarm rang, I always ran for a gun. Better to be shooting at somebody than getting shot at.
I don't know of anything else we need to do unless there's someone has a 5-minute story that would fit in here. Mia Greco, do you have your story? Now's the time. This is a story about a chair, I believe, and I've read it. It's well, let's find out.
I haven't rehearsed it, so it's unexpected, all right? But I can read. All right. It's one of those cute stories that come out in peacetime, which has its roots in the war, when the war was being fought. But this happened after the war. The area is anybody here that has been in Luxembourg at the Battle of the Bulge? Okay. There is a small village. It's called Herborn, Herborn, and it's in Luxembourg. Luxembourg is a small country wedged between Belgium and the German border. On the east side, there is a river, Sauer, And when you're over that river, you're actually on German soil. I've been there 3 times because my husband's brother was killed there. Right over the river, you have the Siegfried Line. You have all heard of that, the high hills, and that's a natural barrier. But right near there is this little village, and it was liberated by the American troops in September of 44, after having been occupied by Nazi Germany for 4 years, just like my country of Holland. The infantry and armored divisions of General George Patton's Third Army had swept across France after breaking out of the Normandy beachhead, which is coming up next month, 60 years ago. By the time they reached Luxembourg, the Germans had retreated across the border into their homeland. Then for the next 55 years, Herborn remained a quiet, peaceful place in a quiet and peaceful country. There is an inn along the river. It's called Johann Goedert, and it was located there near a stone memorial commemorating the end of World War II. It's been there a long time. It was there for about 4 generations of people. The same family owned it all these years. Then, in the summer of 99, which is only 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, almost 5, after the death of their mother, this building, this inn, went up for sale because the 2 granddaughters that owned it in 99 were tired of running it after the death of their mom. So they put it up for sale. In the fall of that year, 99, on a warm and sunny Saturday, the 2 sisters and some of their young friends were cleaning out the attic of that inn. They found a chair on the attic, and it had some carvings on it. On the seat of the chair was a message. The name, Don Ringham, February 11, 1945, and the initials MPLS. It was an exciting discovery because that date was long before these young people were born. Who was this Don Ringham? What happened to him on that day in 1945? What did MPLS mean? Could the man who did the carving still be alive? How could they find him and ask him that question? Then the young people thought of taking the chair to a group of senior citizens, our age, sitting in the warm sun at the nearby memorial in the city square. And then the people got excited. Some of them were there in February 45, and they recalled what a cold winter it was. Those that were over there remember. It was how the Battle of the Bulge, some of them, yeah, and they recalled what a cold winter it was and how the Battle of the Bulge had threatened their town in December and January 44, 45. One of those seniors said he remembered when the great American General George Patton's soldiers were stationed right there after the Germans were driven out. He remembered the American soldiers had lived in the inn Johann Goedert. One of the seniors ran home to his house and returned with a photo of 2 American soldiers standing in front of the inn. It was easy to see the name of the inn on the window, Johann Goedert. Could one of these men be Don Ringham? The next step was to show the chair to a local historian who had written books about World War II. And this historian I have personally met last fall when our family went over there. This local historian who had written books about World War II, he knew that the U.S. 76th Infantry Division had been located at Herborn on the date carved into the chair. Through a phone call to a friend in the 76th Division Association in the United States, this historian was able to verify that Donald Ringham was in fact a member of this association, and his address was in Minneapolis. And he was told that the postal abbreviation for Minneapolis is MPLS. Christmas Eve, 1999, this Ernie that got this letter about the chair, and whom we also met, he made a phone call. He was a Luxembourg citizen, and he was part of that young team that found the chair. He excitedly placed a phone call to Don Ringham in Minneapolis, in the United States. The man who answered the phone was Don Ringham himself. It was Don had been a soldier of the 76th Division in Luxembourg. Now he was 73, and this Ernie is now 43, older, because he was a teenager in 45, so figure out how old he was. He doesn't look like he's a senior, but he isn't. In fact, he works at the Luxembourg airport as a, what's the weatherman? Meteorologist. Don told Ernie that he clearly remembers carving the chair when he was 18 years old. Don's first question to them was, what about the other chair? The one my friend Jim carved the same day I did. But they could tell him that no second chair had been found, only the one with Don's name. Then Don told him how he and his friend Jim carved their names, date, and hometown on the chairs because they were so impressed with the sights of Luxembourg. They were both certain that someday after the war, the two of them would go back to see the place, stay at the inn, and find the chairs. It was as simple as that. The years passed too quickly for them upon discharge, college, career, marriage, children, grandchildren. They didn't give them time for that trip they had planned to go back to Luxembourg. But then Jim died of a heart attack, and their trip together became an impossibility. Then a friendship ensued between Ernie, the young man from Luxembourg who found the chair, and Don, the aging American veteran who had carved his name on it. Flourished as letters were exchanged between them, Don wrote how he and Jim had grown up together at school, in the Boy Scouts, in the Army. Ernie sent an invitation for Don and his wife to visit Herborn, see the sights of Luxembourg, and take the chair back to America with him. While Don was grateful for the generous offer, a physical problem made the long trip to Europe not possible, not feasible. But shortly thereafter, Don shared the story of the chair with another man called Wes, the author of this letter. He had gone to high school with Don and Jim and was inducted in the Army with the two of them. The three trained together and went overseas together. When they were assigned to the 76th Division in Luxembourg, they were separated. After the war, all three went back to Minneapolis and remained friends. I moved away, Wes says, but we always stayed in touch and got together every few years to share stories of our Army past. When Don told me the story of the chair, so Wes is talking again, he was already planning a trip to Luxembourg to share the scenery and memories of his World War II experiences with his wife, Ruth. Our neighbors Wallace and Jay Nutting were going to come with us to visit places in Germany where they had lived during their assignment. Our trip included a memorable September day with the wonderful people of Luxembourg, who remained so grateful for the friendship and assistance of their good friends, the Americans. And I can second that. The people there are still, the citizens are still very enthusiastic when American veterans go back and visit. They get treated really wonderful. In Herborn, they laid wreaths at the memorial there at the town choir, and the town choir sang the national anthems. In the city hall, a Luxembourg flag that had flown over the city hall in 1945 and was signed by the citizens was presented to Wes as a gift to bring back to Don in Minneapolis. Remember, Don himself could not come, but Wes did. Perfectly restored U.S. Army jeeps escorted us to other memorials in nearby towns where Wes had served. They were treated to a special luncheon and finally a visit to a World War II museum, which we also visited last fall, where the chair with Don's name is exhibited. It was a highly emotional and touching experience for them all. And this is only a small piece of a chronicle of your generation, but worth telling. That's it. You have one, do you?
Yes, I do. We've been waiting for several months for an opportunity when there was a little time left over, and thanks to Warren, we have a little bit of time left over. In the meantime, Warren has remembered a couple of things that we might be interested in. Before I turn the mic over to him, two brief items. I had a call from a teacher in, I guess it's the Penlyn School, I think, in, well, anyway, I'm at a blank here. Maybe we just. No, it's another. It's out Route 63. What? Beyond Bluebell. Anyway, out there somewhere. He has had 5 sessions when he has been teaching World War II material to his high school students. He called and told me that he has a conference planned where the students have all had projects where they're doing World War II projects, and they're going to have a conference. I think it's from 10 a.m. until 2:30, and he was wanting to have some of our speakers from our World War II lecture series, our Veterans in the Classroom project, and I put him in touch with Sheila Martin, who will probably be there, but he has several of our former speakers. Don Lewis was an early speaker here. Tony Zanzinger and Craig Scholler, I believe, are the 3 that he's trying to get. It'll be on June 2nd, and we'd like to have other schools use that as a pattern, because in this case he has the students doing projects rather than just listening to somebody talk to them. The other thing I wanted to tell you was that I had a call yesterday from Colonel Julia Paparella, the Navy or the Army nurse who was trained in Abington Hospital and went over with the Harvard hospital unit to France, landed at Normandy shortly after D-Day, I think, maybe within a month. And she has been selected as the person from Pennsylvania to be one of the all-expense-paid trip to France, paid for by the French government for U.S. veterans who have participated in the freeing of France. And she and her husband will be leaving, I think, June 2nd. She called yesterday to say that they will be all awarded the, what is it, the French? Yeah. Croix de Guerre. Pardon my French. And so she has agreed that sometime later after they return that she'll come and tell us about her trip. She's really enthused about it. Let's go back to today's program.
Okay, you want me to use this?
Okay, sure.
I just want to tell you about a terrible thing that happened to me in Belgium when the lady mentioned Holland, which is right next door. As sailors do, we would all went out and wanted to have a couple of good glasses of beer. And you know what happens after you drink beer. So I went into what I thought was the men's room, and my God, a lady came in with the same idea in mind, and nobody had told me that they were co-ed heads. Just one more story. When I was in Newport News just before we sailed on our first trip, I went to this Army PX, and there was a beautiful, beautiful whack there, and we became very friendly, and I was fortunate enough to return to Newport News a couple of times, and we went out and we had great fun. And I'll tell you truthfully, I was really in love with this woman. She was just wonderful. And after the war was over, I spent quite a bit of time trying to locate her, but I couldn't locate her. And finally, when I got my computer, I thought this would probably be a great way to do it. And I was almost sorry I did. After several weeks of searching, I did find her. And it was a real shock. It's not funny. There came on the screen her tombstone in Tennessee. She had passed away. And I felt so sorry that I was never able to get together with her. I would have married her in a minute. She probably would have taken 5 minutes to marry me. Thank you all very much. You're a great audience.
One other item, there is a jar back there for donations, and we have need for it. There are expenses, and you guys are the ones that
Not
have to pay
bad,
for
huh?
it. So appreciate any help you can give it.
What?
What type of work did you do in private life?
I was a steel salesman after the war. Yeah, I was a steel salesman for about 39 years. And it was fun. I like people.
So you didn't go back to sea?
Pardon?
You didn't go back to sea?
Oh God, no. I didn't even, I wasn't sick of it. It's just that I had no yen to do it, you know. Yes, sir.
Any way to get a picture of a Liberty ship? Not this one, this is something.
Pardon me?
Is there a way to get a picture of the Navy of the...
Of a Liberty ship? Yeah, I can even take one of this and run it through the computer if you want. It's no big deal. No, really, write your name and address down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you got one.
Thank you.
Let me ask you a question. You were on Tulagi Harbor?
Pardon me?
You mentioned Tulagi Harbor.
Oh, yeah.
I was there in 42 with the Marines.
Oh, Jesus. I'll tell you a funny story I forgot about today.
Good luck.
That's it.
Good luck. You know, I'm giving a talk this Thursday up at the Naval Air Station. And